Hi everyone, the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V, and normally this is like a one-to-one copy in just a smaller body. But when it comes to the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V, there's an actual change because we are missing something. We are missing a lens. And I think it's a good call. But let's talk about the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V and the camera capabilities of it. Now to begin with, as always, let's talk about the specifications, and this time we only have to go to two lenses. When it comes to the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V, of course we have a collaboration with Zeiss once again. When it comes to the sensors, we get a 48 megapixel sensor with a 1.9 aperture, 24mm equivalent and a 1/135 inch sensor size. This is the main sensor. When it comes to the ultra wide, it's a 12 megapixel sensor with an f-stop of 2.2 and it's 60mm equivalent and a 1/25 inch sensor size. So, let's talk about experience with the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. I think in general the main sensor will deliver you great potential shots. The sensor allows for a lot of details in the shot, and in general they are natural, which is something that I really like. And when it comes to editing these daytime shots, it really delivers good results. But at the same time, I will say, for instance the sky, it is harder to not have it blown out depending on the situation. I feel like this is my biggest struggle when it lies to the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. Partially this is also down to the user, aka me. I need to know my own flaws when it comes to shooting with a phone like this, and realistically you have to know that. But also it comes down to the device itself. Realistically though, in most situations the main sensor will deliver high quality images with great detail and a good depth of field if you use some objects in the background or foreground. The ultra wide is fine, but I would say it's the main sensor here that I really like, even more so if you edit those shots with RAW photography. Now, when it comes to the Sony Xperia series, a lot of times you have to kind of nuance the situation when it comes to a phone like this. This phone doesn't approach situations the same way that, for instance, Vivo, Xiaomi, Apple, Samsung and so on do. The approach is very different, especially to the photography side. They don't use computational photography the same way that some other brands do, and this is most noticeable in low light situations. Their approach is simply, again, very different. Take for instance my iQOO 12. I take a shot, it takes about 2 to 3 seconds and it will get a shot out there. Now in normal situations, when you use manual mode, having that kind of long exposure would result in a shot that has some movement in it. It would result in a shot that is unfocused. But when it comes to computational photography, it compensates for your movement, still allowing a high ISO as well because it has some noise reduction in there. When it comes to Sony, it basically removes the computational photography and kind of becomes the person that edits it. That's the best way I can describe Sony's approach. You are the computational photography. You are the person that really needs to set up the shot and adjust it later on. That's the best way I can approach low light photography when it comes to a phone like this. And this also counts for daytime, but especially comes through with low light. For instance, what you can do is have a longer shutter speed and then a lower ISO. The problem with that, of course, is that it will detect the movement that you are making. Even if it is slightly, it can still be visible in the shot itself. And then you can put up the ISO, but having more ISO results in more noise, and then you need to edit out that noise. This is possible and this is doable in Lightroom, but it really depends on the situation in terms of approach. Again, every single shot has that little bit of a balance that you need to find. While the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V does have auto mode, in extreme situations it will not be capable of doing it that well, and therefore I would say, depending on the situation, honestly you kind of want to approach it as a manual situation, and a tripod would definitely be beneficial for situations like this. And again, I think if you are a person that uses this phone as photography, you know that and you will approach it in such. So during these shots, I think that the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V performed actually quite well. Yes, it is very much of a niche phone, and yes, you need to work with it a little bit, and I feel like auto mode doesn't necessarily bring out the best pictures itself, but it will do perfectly fine for most of the people. But really, realistically, if you buy a phone like this, you kind of want to use the manual mode most of the time to get really the most out of it. And again, what I really like about the Sony series is that they do have separate apps for instance, photography and videography. And when it comes to videography, this thing is actually really good as well when it comes to the capability of playing around with the settings. And of course, recording 4K 120 frames per second. Again, phones that can do that are very, very limited. Now, let's take out the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V to a different location and showcase again what this is capable of in terms of video and of course again, stills as well. So the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V, overall I think this is actually a really good device. There are some basics that I find important that are delivered with this phone, and sadly not a charger, but I'm talking about the 3.5mm headphone jack, micro SD support and a shutter button. Now the shutter button isn't necessarily a necessity when it comes to a phone for me, but if you are going into a phone with camera and photography being your main thing, then a shutter button is definitely something that you should add. And I feel like a lot of phones that are focusing on camera performance are missing that. So I really like having that. When it comes to the main sensor, I will say this is actually a really good main sensor. Yes, your approach has to be very different than your normal photography. We aren't talking about computational photography like some others out there, like Vivo, like Xiaomi and so on. It has a very different approach if you are using auto. When it comes to this phone, I would honestly advise manual. Yes, there are situations that you have to again approach very different. For instance, a sky, if you of course take a normal shot with auto mode, or if you are using manual, you can easily have that the sky is blown out. What you do is simply have a sky that looks proper and then the foreground that looks dark. Therefore compensating and then editing it. And this is where this phone is different. You need to touch up some shots. This especially is the case with low light. In low light there will be quite a bit of noise and you need to have noise reduction on the shot itself, especially because of how you have to shoot it. And that makes it really hard to really nail the shots in low light if you are used to simply shooting with the hand. Because if you have a shutter speed of 2 or 3 seconds or a bit longer, this doesn't have that same computational photography to compensate for the movement that you will have. Even if you have the steadiest hand, you will have slight movement. The slight movement will result in a shot that is a little bit out of focus. Not much, but a little bit. So therefore I would say, if you are preparing for low light photography, the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V isn't necessarily the best for a quick and simple shot. This is a phone that you really take out to plan your photography around. This is a phone for photographers when it comes to the camera side of it. When we are talking about other things, don't get me wrong, this is actually still an excellent phone. It comes with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, it comes with good battery life, the display is perfectly fine, you get the 3.5mm headphone jack for better audio quality, because it definitely is better. Not to mention you can use that as microphone as well, again better than Bluetooth, especially when it comes to the microphone quality, and that is just simply a fact. And then of course you have micro SD support as well. You can get this phone with 128GB and say, you know what, I'm gonna upgrade it. I'm gonna put a micro SD card in there. Because why not? You can. You get more memory then. Either way, the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V for me overall is a really solid phone. You just have to know that this isn't necessarily the phone for everyone. And of course, when it comes to the photography side of it especially, it needs to be a person that really has that passion of photography, really understands how to go around it. And I'm not perfect in this. I still need to learn a lot when it comes to manual mode. But with that being said, I think if you are a photographer and you want to play around with shots, the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V is a really good phone to have. Either way, let me know what you think about the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. What do you think about the shots that I've created? And yes, I will make another video with the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. I'm going to the UK soon and I'm gonna take some shots with it. And it's gonna be featured in a video showcasing, of course, the trip a little bit. Either way, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe. We're really close to getting to that 5,000. We're about 350 away. And of course, don't forget to like and comment below. It really helps with the engagement of the video and therefore it being pushed to others as well. Either way, don't forget to check out my other videos and have a good one.